what I wanted to do with this today, rather than doing like a big lecture, is do this sort of smaller group walking tour. Let's start over here. So this quilt is called Center Stage, and this is one of the better reflections of my quilting philosophy. It's a very traditional block in a very traditional arrangement. It's a very traditional quilt. I fell in love with quilting because I love quilting. I have no desire to change it. And if you take pictures of most of my quilts in grayscale, they're all very traditional. It's only the color that makes them not feel traditional. And I do that a lot. Like, I take pictures of my quilts in black and white just to sort of see how they're sitting. What I love, we were kind of, a few of us who were here early were talking about this earlier, but color for me, like when people say like, what's your favorite color? I don't really have a favorite color. I have a color that I find the most useful, which to me is aqua. It's like a great pair of blue jeans. It goes with everything, right? I would call that the most useful color, but certainly not my favorite color. I love pink. I mean, if something comes in pink, I don't know why you'd buy it in a different color, but it's not my favorite color. It's just, for me, the color you can see from the furthest away, as opposed to red, which red is the only color that I don't particularly love. It feels very aggressive and judgmental to me. So that's what pink is for me. It's like my replacement for red. So you won't find, there's a couple colors you'll almost never find in my fabric and quilts, and that's a true red. Very rarely shows up. Occasionally I do it because I know the world needs it, like it's necessary. But you'll notice that a lot of my colors are more tomato red or watermelon red. They're very often not a true red. It's not a color I use very often, and I almost never use brown. It's a fine color, it just doesn't fit in my world. Like, it's just all the colors mushed together in like an unattractive way. So those are two colors you'll almost never see. They pop up here and there because, again, necessary, but not my favorite thing. And you'll almost never find an actual white. I find white to just be like, I didn't do anything. You'll notice a lot of my, even when you see white, they're soft white, they're creamy white. They're almost never pure white. I always have to add something, because pure white fabric is just fabric with no ink on it. It's just bleached. And I feel like we can do better than bleach, right? I create contrast through opposing colors, not through light and dark. I very rarely work with light and dark as a concept. If I want contrast, I'll put a bright orange next to a yellow, or I'll use a complementary color next to it in order to create a distinction. But I will very rarely use just light and dark to create contrast. I tend to like color in this very narrow lens of bright and like aggressive, you know? So light and dark isn't something I do often. It does show up from time to time by necessity. But another fun fact about this quilt is when I was doing the setting triangles, I ran out of fabric, which is why it has a different fabric on two borders. It was not a design choice. It was, I only get so much yardage in advance, and I ran out. So I could either find a fabric that, like, I could have used like this solid or something that looked like it. And whenever I'm confronted with a close but not the same, I'm like, just go totally the other direction. Just do something the opposite so it looks intentional. Like, I love it when I hear quilt historians talk about quilts, and especially ones that aren't quilters. Those are my favorite, because they'll say things like, why do you think she used this one like double pink fabric all the way to here and then changed it at the end? I was like, she ran out of fabric. Like, it's so obvious. So this is the owl. This is the very first fabric I ever designed. When I designed my first fabric collection, I was looking around at fabrics, and I was not a professional. I was just like trying to be a fabric designer. Didn't even really know that was a job you could have. And I started drawing what I thought a fabric collection needed. I had a stripe, a dot, a paisley, a non-directional print. I was like, this is what makes a fabric collection. When I was drawing the paisley, I was just drawing paisleys, and I was like, oh, that would be really funny. It like sort of looks like an owl, sort of how you look at the clouds and see like shapes in them. And I was like, oh, it kind of looks like an owl. And then I was like, well, I could just make it one. And so I did. I like just rearranged it a little bit, made it an owl. I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And then I made my stripe a birch tree instead of a stripe. And I made my dot a little bee instead of a dot. And then I did a scallop print. And I was like, oh, I'll have fish jumping in and out of the scallop. So that was my first collection. And when I submitted it to fabric companies, I got replies back from 2 companies, Free Spirit and Moda Fabrics. And Free Spirit had at that time Kay Fassett and Amy Butler. Those were my heroes. And they were both at Free Spirit, and I didn't have the confidence to stand shoulder to shoulder with them and call myself an equal, so I went to Moda because I was scared. And I think it was the best decision. I got to cut my teeth at Moda, and they were amazing and a wonderful company. But the first thing Cheryl Freiberg told me, who was the art director there, genius of a woman, terrifying but a genius, is she goes, okay, this animal thing you're doing is cool and all. You know you have to do that for the rest of your life. Like if we do this, this is what you do. And I'm like, well, I can do that. Make things into animals. It's like basically what I do in my head all day long. I'm like, you're a squirrel, you're a raccoon. That kind of started it, and then that's what it's been sort of ever since. And it's evolved and changed over time, but I love animals a lot more than people most of the time. And so building my whole career around that seemed like something I could keep up, and 20 years later, we're still doing it. So this is called Anchors Aweigh. This one was made out of Zuma. Zuma is the beach I grew up at in California, so hence Zuma. But so this was my first sort of like pixelated quilts. I actually, the original quilt that I actually made for my sister because we are opposites in everything ever under the sun. And she was a cheerleader and a sorority girl. And she was a DG, Delta Gamma, and anchors are their like insignia. So my original one I made with her in mind, and when she had her son, I made a miniature version of it for him. And what I discovered in making this quilt, which was super fun, is that it made me really, really popular with like Marine and Navy wives, which I never anticipated, but I got like so many military wife emails, and I was like, oh, unlocked a new category of quilters that I didn't even know existed, the military wives. So this one was fun, and Angela, again, did her amazingness here and did the sort of rope that wraps around. I mean, the quilting really finishes the story. That's the point of the quilting, because before a quilt is quilted, it's just fiber art. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's not a quilt. What makes it a quilt is batting, is the 3 layers in the stitching. That's what makes it a quilt. So the quilter is one of the most important part of my processes, because until they put their mark on it, I'm a fiber artist. And it's not until they finish that I'm a quilter. And so it's a really, really important emotional part, and I take very, very good care of my quilters. But so she did all of this like great water bits and feathers, and she does a really good job. All of the quilters I work with do a really good job of balancing sort of traditional and more modern quilting styles, which is what I love. I love a feather. This is sort of a watery feather, but I love a feather because it's a nod to a very traditional quilting style. And so I really like to always have a little bit of that present. But yeah, so this is Zuma in my anchor. This is sort of an era for me too, like the butterfly, the anchor of quilts that were illustrative. Kind of taking my illustration skills and putting it into patchwork has been something really fun. And I sort of ebb and flow between those things, like something more graphic and traditional, then I get more illustrative. I don't really stick to a style. I kind of like to do whatever feels good in the moment. This felt good in the moment of 4 years. Because it's completely English paper piece and totally hand sewn. And so this quilt, the original quilt is called Tula Nova, and it's this much of it. But this was my response to the La Passacaglia quilt, which I've also made. But I wanted to make a version of it because a lot of people wanted to make it, but they were scared of it. So I wanted to make a version of that quilt using the same sort of mathematical geometry, but with larger pieces that were a little bit easier to tackle. So the quilt's smaller and it's just one big medallion. And then I had made so many of these because I taught this class for many, many years. This was my English paper piecing class. So and I would always start my class with this. This is what we'd finish in a class, this centerpiece. So I had so many centerpieces from teaching the class for like 10 years that I was like, well, I can't just like throw these away. So I was like, what if I made a supernova? And so that's what this became. This is actually all of my classes, and which you can't see, but written on the back of the fabric, if anyone were ever to take this apart someday, is the city where I taught that class. So it's inside the quilt, which I know nobody else does, but I wrote it in fabric marker on the seam allowance. It's like Denver, 2012, so it's all the different places I taught that class is actually written on each block. And then I just put them all together and had a lot of fun figuring out. I mean, what I love about English paper piecing is just figuring out which fabrics to use where. And so with this one, this is always a really fun quilt to teach people like sort of color and fabric selection on for me, because what I do is I pick out the 10 star colors first, and then those go out in spokes is kind of what I call them. And then everything that sits between these two colors is some variation of these two colors. Everything that sits between the pink and the purple is pink and purple, pink and red, pink and red. So for me, choosing fabrics and color isn't about choosing, it's about eliminating options. So that's what I'm doing when I'm making a quilt. I'm just eliminating options, because if I'm looking at my whole studio for which fabric to pick next, that's really overwhelming. But if I go, I'm in the red drawer, which is not red, or I'm in the pink drawer, that eliminates 90% of the rest of the fabrics in my studio and gives me a much narrower selection process. So you can see, if you look between the spokes, all the fabrics are yellows and oranges, yellows and greens, greens and more greens, greens and aquas. So they all follow whichever, and I like to set up a system for myself. So that was system number 1. System number 2 was that all the joining pieces would be blues. System rule number 3, I love a rule, type A, remember? The next one was that all these outer rings would be a cave polka dot and a stripe. So they're all the same fabric in the star spokes and the stripes all the way around, just in different colors. And then when I got to the outside, I used instead of just using a white to set it all together or just like a plain fabric, I used my pastel solids, and between the purple and blue, it's a bluey purple, between the blue and the blue. So the solid changes depending on which spoke set it sits between. What's on the back of this bad boy? Oh yeah, ladybugs.
I love it.